There is a story told about the night before the Buddha's awakening. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree, still and upright, and a figure appeared, not a demon with horns or flames, but something quieter, something familiar. The texts call this figure Mara, and Mara spoke in the voice of doubt, of distraction, of old hungers. He offered pleasure. He whispered fear. He suggested that perhaps this sitting, this effort, was pointless. And the Buddha, according to the story, did not fight. He did not argue or push away. He simply said, "I see you, Mara. I know you." And he continued to sit. This encounter was not a single event. Mara returned throughout the Buddha's life. He appeared when the Buddha was tired, when he was teaching, when he was alone. The texts describe Mara as an external figure, but they also describe him as something closer, a pattern, a pull. The voice of craving and aversion that lives in the mind itself. We might think of temptation as something that arrives with drama, a sudden craving, a sharp impulse. But often it is quieter than that. It is the small turn away from what is uncomfortable. The reach for the phone when boredom arises. The mental argument that begins when someone speaks and we feel a flicker of irritation. The way the mind offers a story about why we deserve this, why we need that, why now is not the time to sit still. Temptation, in the Buddhist sense, is not about good and bad. It is about the pull toward comfort and away from discomfort. It is the mind's habit of seeking solid ground in a world that does not offer it. Imagine sitting by a river. The water moves past, carrying leaves and small branches. Some catch on rocks and spin there for a moment before releasing. The mind is like this. Thoughts and impulses arrive, and sometimes they catch. We lean toward them. We follow them down to stream without noticing we have moved. Mara is not the river. Mara is the suggestion that we must follow, that we must grab hold, that we will miss something if we do not. When the Buddha said, "I see you," Mara, he was not rejecting the experience. He was naming it. He was meeting the impulse with awareness instead of reaction. This is the practice. Not to become someone who never feels the pull, but to notice the pull as it happens. To see the pattern before it becomes a path. You can feel this in the body. A craving arises, and there is often a tightness in the chest or belly, a restlessness in the hands. The breath may quicken. Aversion appears, and the jaw tightens. The shoulders lift. There is a subtle bracing, a leaning away. These are not problems. They are information. They are the body showing you where the mind is caught. The instruction is simple. When you notice the pull, pause. You do not need to act. You do not need to fix it. Just notice. Feel the breath moving in and out. Feel the weight of the body where it meets the chair or the floor. Let the impulse be there without following it. This is not suppression. It is space. It is the gap between the arising and the reaction. Mara does not disappear when you do this. The pull does not vanish, but something shifts. The urgency softens. The story the mind is telling loses some of its grip. You begin to see that the impulse is not a command. It is a visitor. It arrives, it stays for a moment, and if you do not feed it, it moves on. This is where the practice becomes interesting, not in the absence of temptation, but in the meeting of it. Each time you pause, each time you name what is happening without judgment, you are training the mind in a different response. You are learning that you do not have to believe every thought. You do not have to follow every impulse. You can sit by the river and watch the water move without being pulled downstream. So as we begin, let yourself settle. Feel the surface beneath you. Notice the rhythm of your breath. If there is tension in the body, let it be there. If the mind is already reaching towards something, notice that too. This is not about becoming calm. It is about becoming aware. And in that awareness, we meet what the Buddha met. Not as a battle, but as a recognition. I see you, I know you, and I do not have to follow. There is an old story in the Buddhist tradition. The Buddha sat in meditation, and Mara came to him. Mara is not a demon with horns or a figure of ultimate evil. Mara is the personification of everything that pulls us away from clarity. Desire, fear, doubt, restlessness. The story says that Mara threw armies at the Buddha, hurled weapons, conjured seductions. And the Buddha did not fight. He did not close his eyes. He simply looked. He saw Mara clearly and said something close to this: I see you. You may sit with me, but you will not lead me. This is not a story about defeating an enemy. It is a story about what happens when we stop treating our own impulses as invaders to be conquered. Most of us live differently. When a craving arrives, for food, for distraction, for approval, we feel it as something wrong, something that should not be here. We tense against it. We bargain with it. We try to push it away, or sometimes we surrender to it completely, as if we have no choice. We treat the impulse as if it has more reality, more authority than our own awareness. But there is a third possibility. It is the one the Buddha demonstrated. It begins with simple seeing. Imagine someone knocking at your door. You do not have to open it immediately. You do not have to refuse them from behind the door either. You can pause. You can look through the peephole or simply listen. You can know who is there before you decide what to do. This knowing changes everything. It is no longer a surprise. It is no longer a threat that forces your hand. You see it clearly, and in that seeing, you have a choice. This is what recognition does. When a difficult impulse arises, anger, hunger, the urge to check your phone, the pull toward a habit you are trying to break. The first thing that happens is usually that you are already caught in it. Your body is already tightening. Your mind is already spinning stories about what you need or what you should do. You feel reactive, helpless. But there is a moment before you act. There is a moment when you can simply know what is happening. Not judge it. Not try to change it. Just see it. A person sits alone in the evening. The day has been difficult. There is a tension in the chest, a kind of hollow restlessness. The first impulse is to reach for something. A drink, a screen, a snack. The mind says, I need to feel better. I need a break. And usually that is the end of it. The reaching happens. But what if you paused? What if, before the hand moved, you simply noticed there is restlessness? There is a wanting to feel different. You do not say this as a judgment. You do not say, this is bad, or I should not feel this. You simply name what is present the way you might name a guest at the door. Oh, it is restlessness. It is the wanting to escape. In that naming, something shifts. The impulse is still there. The restlessness has not disappeared, but it is no longer operating in the dark. It is no longer driving you like an invisible hand. You have seen it. You know what it is. This is what the Buddha meant. Mara sits with you. The impulses do not vanish because you become aware. Desire does not stop existing. Fear does not dissolve. But they no longer have the power they had before, because they are no longer hidden. They are no longer confused with truth or necessity. The practice is simple. When you feel a strong pull towards something you want, away from something you do not, pause for a breath, maybe two, and silently name what is happening. If it is craving, you might think, this is wanting. If it is fear, this is fear. If it is the urge to escape, this is the urge to escape. Do not make it elaborate. Do not analyze why it is there or what it means. Just name it. the way you might name a color you see or a sound you hear. What happens next is not something you force. Sometimes, after naming the impulse clearly, it loses its grip. You notice that you do not actually want that drink, or that the urge to check your phone has already begun to fade. Other times, you still reach for the thing. But even then, something is different. You are reaching with awareness. You are not being pulled by an invisible rope. There is a difference between doing something while caught in it and doing something while seeing it clearly. The Buddha did not sit in a state of perfect immunity. He sat in a state of perfect clarity. He saw Mara. He saw the impulses, the temptations, the doubts. And because he saw them clearly, they could not lead him. They could not pretend to be something other than what they were. This is available to you right now. Not as a distant achievement, but as the next moment. The next time you feel a strong impulse pulling you, you can look, you can pause, you can see who is knocking at the door, and in that seeing, you are no longer a puppet. You are awake. The impulse may still be there, but you are no longer confused about what is happening. You are no longer at its mercy. You are simply aware, and awareness itself is the freedom. There is an old story from the early Buddhist texts about the Buddha sitting beneath a tree and a figure called Mara appearing before him. Mara is not a demon in the way we might imagine. Mara is the personification of everything that pulls us away from seeing clearly. Mara offers temptation, distraction, fear, flattery, and the Buddha sitting there does not fight. He does not deny. He simply sees what is being offered, and he sees it clearly. This story is not about some ancient event. It is about something happening now, in your own mind, perhaps more than once a day. The promise that Mara makes is always the same. It is the promise of relief. You feel uncomfortable. You feel restless. You feel a lack of something. And then something appears. A thought, a sensation, a desire that says this will fix it. This will make you feel better. This will fill the emptiness. And it looks true. It feels true in the moment. The Buddha called this craving. Not craving as a moral failure, but as a pattern. A reaching towards something, a belief that satisfaction lies outside yourself, in getting or having or becoming something you are not right now. Here is what is worth noticing. The promise is never quite honest. Not because anyone is lying to you, but because the very structure of the promise is built on a misunderstanding. When you reach for something because you believe it will relieve discomfort, you are already assuming that the discomfort is the problem. But the discomfort itself is not what keeps you trapped. It is the grasping at relief that does. Imagine someone very thirsty, standing in the desert. Their mouth is dry, their throat aches, and someone offers them salt water. It looks like water, it tastes like it might quench. They drink. For a moment, there is a sensation of wetness on the tongue. But then the thirst grows worse. The salt pulls more moisture from the body. The thirst deepens, so they drink again. And again the thirst comes back, stronger. This is not a problem with thirst itself. This is what happens when you try to quench thirst with salt water. We do this all the time. We feel a kind of emptiness, a restlessness, and we reach for something to fill it. We check our phone. We eat something we do not really want. We scroll. We plan. We worry. We fantasize. Each time there is a moment of relief, a sense that something is happening, that the emptiness is being addressed. But then, very quickly, the original feeling returns. Often it returns stronger, and we reach again. The Buddha did not say that desire itself is wrong. He said that craving, this particular kind of grasping, This belief that satisfaction can be found outside yourself by acquiring or achieving or becoming. This is the root of suffering, not because desire is bad, but because the structure of craving cannot deliver what it promises. When Mara appeared to the Buddha, Mara offered him everything: power, distraction, fear. The Buddha's response was not to resist or to fight back. It was simply to see, to recognize what was being offered, and to understand, with complete clarity, what would happen if he took it. He saw the salt water for what it was. This is what awareness actually does. It does not prevent temptation from arising. It does not make you stronger or more virtuous. It simply allows you to see the pattern, to notice, without judgment, what is being offered and what the actual consequence will be. The consequence is not punishment. It is simply that the craving continues. The relief is temporary. The dissatisfaction returns, and you are back where you started, but now with an additional layer of experience. You have lived through the cycle again. There is something quiet that happens when you see this clearly. Not a decision to stop craving, not a resolution or a promise to yourself, but a kind of recognition, a seeing. When you truly understand that salt water will not quench thirst, you do not need to use willpower to refuse it. You simply see it for what it is. This is not something that happens once and then you are finished. It happens again and again, each time a craving arises. And cravings will keep arising, because this is how the mind works. There is an opportunity to see, to notice what is being promised, to sense into what actually happens when you follow it. The practice is small. It is not about controlling yourself or becoming a better person. It is simply this: notice one small craving today. Something simple, a desire for food or comfort or distraction. Something you can actually watch. And when you satisfy it, pause for a moment. Notice what happens after, not to judge yourself, not to prove anything, but simply to sense into it. Does the satisfaction last? What arises next? Is there relief, or does something else come? You do not need to do this perfectly. You do not need to catch every craving. Just one. Just enough to see the pattern directly, in your own experience, without anyone telling you it is true. When you see it yourself, something shifts. Not dramatically, but quietly. The salt water becomes easier to recognize. There is a story from the early teachings about the Buddha sitting in meditation, and Mara, the figure who represents delusion, craving, and fear, appearing before him with all manner of temptation and threat, armies, seductions, doubts, visions of failure. And what the Buddha did was simple. He did not fight. He did not push away. He looked directly at what was arising and saw it clearly. He sat still. Most of us, when something uncomfortable appears in our mind or body, do the opposite. We move. We reach for something to soothe it, distract from it, or push it away entirely. We do this so quickly that we never actually feel what the discomfort is. We only feel the urgency to be rid of it. This is the real problem, not the discomfort itself. The problem is that we flee before we understand. Think of weather moving through an open valley. A storm approaches, rain begins, the wind picks up. A person standing in that valley has a choice. They can run for shelter immediately, the moment they feel the first drops. Or they can stand for a moment and feel what is actually happening. The temperature dropping, the wind on their skin, the sound of rain, the way the clouds move across the sky. None of it is permanent. None of it is a personal attack. It is simply weather. It arrives, it moves through, it leaves. When we sit in meditation and an uncomfortable feeling arises, restlessness, sadness, a tight sensation in the chest, boredom, anger, we are in the same valley. The impulse is immediate to fix it, change it, escape it. We shift our position. We open our eyes. We think about something else. We judge ourselves for having the feeling in the first place. All of this is movement. All of it is a kind of running. The Zen teaching says it's simply, do not push the cloud away. Let it pass through the sky of your sitting. This is not about passivity or resignation. It is about something much more precise. It is about the difference between resisting an experience and allowing it to be there. When you resist, you create a second layer of suffering on top of the first. The original discomfort plus the effort of fighting it. The original discomfort plus the story you tell about what it means. The original discomfort plus the fear that it will never leave. But when you allow it, something shifts. Not because the feeling goes away immediately. It may not. But because you stop adding to it. You stop the internal argument. You stop the running. There is a physical dimension to this that is worth noticing. When you tense against an uncomfortable sensation, your body tightens, your breath becomes shallow, your nervous system reads this as danger and amplifies the discomfort. But when you soften toward it even slightly, even with uncertainty, your body begins to settle, your breath can deepen. The feeling is still there, but it is no longer being squeezed and held and made into something larger than it actually is. This is where Mara comes in. Mara is not really a demon outside you. Mara is the impulse to flee, to cling, to grasp, to push away. Mara is the part of your mind that says this discomfort should not be here, that something is wrong, that you need to do something right now. When you sit and feel an uncomfortable feeling, Mara appears. And the traditional response, the one the Buddha modeled, is not to fight Mara. It is to see him clearly and not move. The moment you stop running, Mara loses power. Not because the feeling disappears, but because you are no longer feeding the fear with your resistance. There is a way to taste this directly. It requires very little. It requires only 5 minutes and a willingness to sit still with one uncomfortable feeling without trying to change it. Find a place where you can sit without being interrupted. Sit in a way that is comfortable enough but alert. You are not trying to be comfortable, you are trying to be present. Close your eyes if that feels right, or soften your gaze downward. Bring to mind something that is mildly uncomfortable right now. Not a trauma, not something overwhelming, something simple. Maybe a tightness in your shoulders, maybe a restless feeling in your legs, maybe a low-grade anxiety, maybe boredom, maybe a feeling of not being good enough at something. Something that is present, but not catastrophic. Feel where it lives in your body. Notice its shape, its temperature, its texture. Does it have an edge or is it diffuse? Is it moving or still? Now do nothing about it. Not in a grim way. Not in a way that involves gritting your teeth. Simply sit with it the way you would sit with a cloud passing overhead. You do not have to like it. You do not have to approve of it. You just let it be there. Notice what happens when you stop pushing against it. Notice the difference between the discomfort itself and the story about the discomfort. Notice if it changes. Notice if it stays the same. Notice if you can breathe into it. Notice if your body can soften even slightly around it. This is not a special technique. This is simply what happens when you stop running and turn to face what is actually here. There is a story from the early traditions about the Buddha sitting in meditation and Mara. The force of delusion, craving, and aversion, appearing before him in many forms, sometimes as a demon, sometimes as a beautiful woman, sometimes as doubt itself. Each time, the Buddha simply saw what was there. He did not fight it. He did not chase it away. He did not pretend it wasn't happening. He looked, and in that looking, the appearance had no power over him. This is not a story about winning a battle. It is a story about what happens when you stop believing that your awareness depends on what appears within it. Most of us live as if this is not true. We live as if the quality of our mind, the steadiness of our attention, the peace we might find, all of these things rise and fall with what we experience. When something pleasant arrives, we feel solid. When something difficult comes, we feel shaken. When boredom or restlessness surfaces, we feel lost. We have organized our entire inner life around the idea that we are only as stable as what we perceive. But there is something else happening underneath this. Something that does not move. Think of the ocean floor. Far below where the waves churn and crash, where light cannot reach, there is a bed of sand and stone that does not shift with the surface. The waves may be violent. The surface may be torn apart by wind and storm, but that floor remains. It is not indifferent to the waves. It holds them, supports them, but it is not changed by them. It does not become rough when the surface is rough. It does not become calm when the surface calms. It simply is what it is. Your awareness is like that floor. What arises in your mind, thoughts, sensations, emotions, impulses, these are the waves. They are real. They have texture and movement, but they are not what you are. You are the capacity in which they appear, and that capacity does not depend on their content. This is what the teaching means when it says the mirror is not changed by what it reflects. A mirror does not become angry when an angry face appears in it. It does not become beautiful when a beautiful face appears. The mirror simply reflects. Its nature is unchanged. And yet, we spend so much of our lives treating our awareness as if it were the reflection, not the mirror. We believe we are the anger, the beauty, the fear, the desire. We believe we are the wave. The Buddha's meeting with Mara is a teaching about this forgetting and about what happens when we remember. When temptation arises, and it does arise in every life in countless forms, we usually respond in one of two ways. Either we grasp for it, believing it will complete us or make us happy, or we push it away, believing it will harm us. Both responses assume that what is appearing has power over what we are. Both responses forget the floor beneath the waves. But there is a third way, not a third way that is better or more spiritual. Simply a third way that is available, that the Buddha discovered, and that anyone can discover. It is to notice that you are aware of the temptation, that you are aware of the impulse to grasp, that you are aware of the impulse to push away. And in that noticing, something shifts. You do not have to do anything with this noticing. You do not have to make the temptation go away. You do not have to prove you are strong. You do not have to achieve anything. You simply rest your attention on the fact of awareness itself, the fact that experience is happening and that you are here, knowing it. When you do this, even for a moment, you touch something that does not move. Not because you have become special or enlightened, but because you have stopped confusing the mirror with what it reflects. You have remembered that the ocean floor is there, beneath the waves, whether you think about it or not. This is not something you have to believe. It is something you can sense directly. Right now, you can notice the breath moving. You can notice the body sitting or lying. You can notice sounds or the absence of sounds. And as you notice these things, notice also that there is a noticing happening. A simple, quiet awareness that is here, observing, not judging whether the breath is good or bad, not trying to make it different, just aware. That awareness does not become unstable when the breath becomes shallow. It does not become agitated when the mind becomes agitated. It is like the floor beneath the waves. It holds everything, and it is changed by nothing when Mara appears in your life, as doubt, as craving, as fear, as the 1,000 small temptations that pull at your attention every day. You can meet it the way the Buddha did, not by fighting, not by pretending it is not there, but by resting attention on the one who is aware of it, by touching, even briefly, the quiet that holds all experience. This is the practice, not a technique to master, not a goal to achieve, simply a return, again and again, to the awareness that is already here, to the floor beneath the waves, to the mirror that is not changed by what it reflects. There is an old story in the Buddhist tradition about the Buddha sitting beneath the Bodhi tree. On the night of his awakening, a figure called Mara appears, not as a demon with horns, but as a presence that embodies every form of temptation, fear, and distraction that the human mind can manufacture. Mara offers pleasure. Mara threatens harm. Mara whispers doubt. And in the story, the Buddha does not fight Mara. He does not try to banish him or prove him wrong. Instead, he simply sees him. He recognizes what is happening. And in that recognition, Mara loses his grip. This is not a story about good versus evil. It is a story about what happens when you stop being unconscious. Most of us live in a constant negotiation with our own version of Mara. Not an external demon, but the pull of craving, toward comfort, toward distraction, toward the promise that this next thing will finally settle us, and the push of aversion, away from discomfort, away from boredom, away from the feeling that something is wrong. We spend enormous energy either chasing or fleeing, and in that movement, we become smaller. We become reactive. We lose the ground beneath us. The teaching is simple when you know the thief. The thief has no power. This does not mean understanding Mara intellectually, the way you might understand a concept in a book. It means seeing him as he actually is, in the moment he arises. It means noticing the exact shape of the pull before you move. It means feeling the texture of the fear before you contract. Think of standing on the riverbank. The river is moving. The current is real and strong. You can feel its pull if you wade in. But from the bank, you can see the whole thing. You can watch the water move without being swept along. You can notice which currents are fast and which are slow. You can choose where to step or whether to step at all. The moment you lose awareness of where the bank is, the moment you forget that solid ground exists, you become the current. You are no longer choosing, you are being moved. This is what happens with temptation and craving. We become what we resist or what we chase. A person who is constantly fighting the urge to check their phone is still defined by that phone. A person who is constantly indulging in scrolling is also defined by it. The phone has them either way. The thief has their attention, and attention is power. But there is a third possibility. It is not about white-knuckling your way to virtue. It is not about suppressing desire or pretending it does not exist. It is about creating space. It is about knowing where you stand. When a strong pull arises, and it will arise, because that is what minds do. Something shifts if you can pause before you move. Not a pause that lasts for minutes. Sometimes it is only a second or two. In that gap, you feel your feet on the ground. You feel your breath moving. You notice the pull as a sensation, not as a command. You recognize it the way you might recognize an old acquaintance whose name you have learned. Oh, there you are again. Impatience. Restlessness. The hunger for something to change right now. In that moment of recognition, something loosens. The pull is still there. The desire or the fear has not vanished, but you are no longer fused with it. You are not the current. You are standing on the bank, watching the current move, and from that place, you can respond instead of react. You can choose. This is not something that happens once and stays fixed. It is not enlightenment. It is just what happens when awareness is present. The pull will come again tomorrow, and the day after that. Each time, the practice is the same. Pause, feel the ground, notice what is actually here. Not what you are afraid of, not what you are chasing. What is actually here right now, in your body and breath. The Buddha did not defeat Mara by being stronger or more righteous. He defeated Mara by not playing Mara's game. He did not resist the temptation. He did not indulge it. He simply saw it clearly and continued sitting. The temptation had no one to tempt anymore, because he was not in the story Mara was telling. When you stand on the riverbank and watch the current, you are not trying to stop the river. The river will flow whether you watch it or not, but you are no longer drowning in it. And that is the whole thing. That is the freedom. Not the absence of desire or fear, but the presence of ground beneath your feet. The presence of choice. The presence of you, aware and still, while everything else moves. In the old stories, there is a moment when the Buddha sits beneath the Bodhi tree and Mara comes. Mara is the force of distraction, of doubt, of desire, the part of mind that pulls away from clarity. The Buddha sees Mara. He does not fight. He simply acknowledges, "I see you," and Mara leaves. This image is simple and clean. One encounter, one victory. But the stories do not end there. Mara returns. Again and again, Mara appears. Not because the Buddha failed, not because he did something wrong, but because this is how mind works. What arises will arise again. There is something we need to understand about this. We tend to think of practice as a journey toward a final state, a place where temptation no longer comes, where doubt no longer visits, where the old patterns simply stop appearing. We work hard, we meditate, we notice our habits, and when something shifts, when we have a moment of clarity or a day of ease, we feel we have finally solved it. We have won. Then the pattern returns, and we feel we have failed. But this is not failure. This is the nature of things. The tide comes in each day. The shore does not fail when the water returns. The water comes because that is what water does. It rises and falls. It is not a personal betrayal. It is rhythm. In the same way, the mind has rhythms. Doubt arises. Restlessness arises. Old habits of thinking and wanting surface again. This is not a sign that your practice is broken. This is the nature of mind moving through time. The Buddha's teaching was clear about this. He did not promise that you would reach a state where nothing difficult ever arose again. He taught that when something arises, pain, confusion, craving, aversion, you could meet it differently, not by fighting it, not by trying to make it permanent or permanent by pushing it away, but by seeing it clearly, by knowing this too is impermanent. This too will pass. When Mara returns in the stories, the Buddha does not seem surprised. He does not say, "Why are you back? I thought we were done." He simply meets what is there. He sees it. He names it. And because he is not caught in the story of, "This should not be happening," there is no struggle. Mara has no foothold. This is the quiet revolution, not victory that lasts forever, but the ability to meet the same thing again without the exhaustion of thinking. You should have already defeated it. Consider what happens in ordinary life. You notice you are anxious. You practice, you breathe, you find some space. For a while, the anxiety seems lighter. Then one morning, it is back. The old tightness in your chest. the familiar loop of worry. And something in you says, I thought I was past this. I thought I had worked this out. That thought, that you should be past it, is often heavier than the anxiety itself. The anxiety is just sensation and thought arising. But the judgment that it should not be here, that you should have solved it, that something is wrong with you for experiencing it again, that creates a second layer of suffering. What if, instead, you simply noticed, here is that pattern again, just like the tide, just like weather, just like the seasons returning. This does not mean you do nothing. The Buddha did not sit passively while Mara danced around him. He was awake. He was aware. He was present. But his presence was not the presence of someone trying to force an outcome. It was the presence of someone simply seeing what is true. When you notice a pattern returning, whether it is doubt, desire, anger, or fear, you can practice this kind of presence. You do not have to solve it today. You do not have to make it never return. You simply meet it. You notice where you feel it in your body. You notice what thoughts come with it. You notice how it wants to pull your attention, and you do not resist that pull. You simply see it. The way you might notice the tide coming in without needing to stop the tide. There is a practice that emerges naturally from this understanding. At the end of a day, it can be useful to notice one pattern that returned, not to judge yourself for it, not to make a plan to finally eliminate it, but simply to acknowledge this arose today. I met it. I did not get lost in the story of it, or perhaps I did get lost, and then I found my way back. Either way, it moved through. This is not achievement in the way we usually think of achievement. There is no medal. There is no finish line. But there is something quieter happening. You are learning to live with the actual texture of being human, with the fact that patterns return, with the fact that Mara keeps showing up, and with the fact that you do not need to defeat Mara once and for all. You only need to see clearly when Mara is here now. The tide will come in tomorrow, and the day after, and you will still be here on the shore awake to it. When Mara appears again, and he will, you might find yourself reaching for the old strategies. The urge to fight back. The impulse to prove you're stronger now, more disciplined, less vulnerable. And in that reaching, you may notice something. The tightness in your chest, the way the breath shortens, the familiar taste of resistance. This is where the practice lies, not in the absence of temptation, but in what you do when it arrives. You don't have to become someone who never feels pulled. The Buddha himself sat with Mara throughout his life. What changed was not the arrival of difficulty, but the quality of attention he brought to it. He stopped treating each wave as an emergency. He stopped believing that his peace depended on making certain thoughts disappear. When you notice the pull toward distraction, toward comfort, toward the story that says you're not enough or you need more, you can pause, just for a breath. You don't have to act on it immediately. You don't have to shame yourself for feeling it. You can let it be present the way you'd let a sound be present. It arrives, you notice, it passes. Sometimes the noticing is enough. Sometimes the craving dissolves just because you saw it clearly. Other times it doesn't dissolve at all. It stays. It repeats. And even then, you have a choice. You can meet it again with the same steady attention, without the added weight of disappointment. This is not about perfection. It's about honesty. Seeing what's actually here, rather than what you wish were here, or what you're afraid might be here. The Buddha called Mara by name. He didn't pretend the forces weren't real. He didn't spiritually bypass his own humanity. He looked directly and said, I see you. And in that seeing, the power shifted. You can do this too. When the impulse rises to numb out, to scroll, to eat past fullness, to pick a fight, to withdraw, you can name it. Quietly, without drama. This is restlessness. This is fear. This is the wanting to escape. And then you can feel where it lives in your body. The heat, the tightness, the hollow ache. You can stay with that sensation for just a moment longer than usual. What you'll find is that sensations change. They peak, they soften, they move. Nothing stays at full intensity when you stop feeding it with reaction. The body knows how to metabolize experience when you give it space. And sometimes you won't stay with it. Sometimes you'll follow the craving all the way through. You'll reach for the thing, do the thing, say the thing. And that's information too. Not failure, information. You can notice what it felt like, what happened after, whether it brought the relief you expected, whether the relief lasted. This is how you learn, not through shame, but through clear seeing. The path is not a straight line, it loops, it circles back. You meet the same patterns again, but each time you meet them with a little more awareness, a little less identification. You start to see them as weather, not as truth. Passing through, not permanent. Mara doesn't disappear, but your relationship to him changes. He becomes less like an enemy and more like a reminder. A bell that rings to bring you back to presence. Each time he arrives, you have another chance to practice, another opportunity to choose awareness over automaticity. This is enough. You don't need to win every encounter. You don't need to transcend your humanity. You just need to keep showing up, keep noticing, keep meeting what arises with as much gentleness as you can find. Imagine a pond in the early morning. The surface is still. Then a breeze moves through, and ripples spread across the water. For a while, the surface is disturbed. You can't see through to the bottom. But if you wait, if you let the water be, the ripples fade. The surface settles. Clarity returns, not because you forced it, but because stillness is the water's nature. Your mind is like this. Disturbance is natural. Ripples will come. But underneath, there is a quality of awareness that remains undisturbed. You don't have to create it. You only have to stop stirring the water. Let yourself rest here. Let the surface settle in its own time. If you'd like to continue, there are other teachings waiting. No rush. They'll be here when you're ready.